Welcome. Thanks for coming back. Really good to have you here again.
Wonderful to see you, Linda.
So the session is fast forward. Can a GDS really fast forward? Are there some elements of the technology that can fast forward?
Well, I ran track when I was at university. I was a sprinter. I turned 54 last week, and I will say the older I get, the faster I was. Now, as it pertains to the business, the Sabre of today is very different than the Sabre of yesteryear. And I'll use that as a proxy for the GDS industry. We're now nearly fully cloud native. We're building open modular solutions. We're leveraging Gen AI, you just heard from Google. So we are a huge Gemini consumer. And if you think about what we're doing in the intermediary space, we now have a multi-source content platform that basically integrates Edifact, NDC, low-cost carrier content, normalizes all that with very sophisticated algorithms, and then onward distributes that through all channels. And so think about the need of the industry, which is transparency, choice, dynamic retailing, efficiency. We do that today even better than we did it yesterday. And so I think the answer is this is a very different company than what it was before. Mm-hmm. If you go back, and an analogy I like to use is streaming versus cable television. If you went back to 2005 and you were a cable TV provider, imagine if you had the foresight to say, I see streaming coming. And you could basically adopt a model where you say, I will consume content from media companies, whether it's traditional cable, whether it's on-demand or live with different commercial models, or normalize that. I'll distribute that into legacy tablets, meaning the TV, or into any new mediums. That would be an incredible platform.
Yep.
They failed to do that. I think what we and perhaps others have seen is the opportunity to transform ourselves to do that at pace.
So choose the bits of the best of breed technology that you want, put it all together and come up with something awesome.
Correct. So I think a lot of people will conflate Edifact and GDS. I'd say Edifact and GDS is a component of the platform we now operate.
So you did mention NDC there. I don't want to talk too much about it, but how kind of, how are we going to move forward and not leave kind of stakeholders behind? Because we're already talking about offer and order, and yet NDC isn't sorted in any way, sort of shape or form. Right. So how are we going to do this and not make the same mistakes of the past?
Yeah, we're about 12, 13 years into the NDC journey. And I think where you've seen progress in NDC to date has largely been adoption by OBTs, or excuse me, with OTAs, because think about their model, which is they're selling a price-led search, generally more simple itineraries to the consumer, and it's more akin to what airlines have exposed through that channel. If you're a brick-and-mortar travel agent or you're a TMC, you're selling what is a more complex itinerary, servicing is a much bigger element. And what happened up until a year or two ago is I think the airlines had not properly contemplated the downstream journey and the utility that's provided by those types of entities to the consumer. And so we've spent, for example, the last 2 years building about 600 unique functionalities or use cases to make NDC behave as closely to Edifact as possible, so that if you're a TMC, for example, this doesn't disrupt your workflow integration, it doesn't degrade user experience. And so I think we're at a pretty good pace now where NDC can begin to go fast. Why do airlines want NDC? At its most simple form, it's to sell more dynamically in B2B as they do in B2C. So I think you're going to begin to see that gain more traction over time, but it recognizes, I think what we try to do is balance the needs of the stakeholders on both sides of the equation. Offer and order, I look at as very different. Offer and order is how do airlines become even better at dynamic retailing across all of their channels. And so NDC is but the intermediary channel.
Now, we're also contending with AI. Do you worry that disintermediation could happen? Because you could potentially have customer goes to airline, gets fare, gets prices, gets itinerary, delivered straight back to them, no need for GDS.
So I think that when you look at the utility we provide as an intermediary, one is the aggregation of availability and rates, et cetera. It's the booking, and then it's all of the downstream servicing and activity that happens thereafter. And so for many travel agencies, we are the closest thing they get to an operating system. Even if they're sourcing this fare differently, the need for that utility is still there. When you look at AI generally, I think the big question to me is going to be, when you think about consumer search and consumer journey, is where are they going to find that tomorrow? Are they still going to go to Google and to the OTA and to the airline, or walk into the brick and mortar travel agent? The answer is yes, but maybe large tech platforms that don't play in travel today will be able to capture some of that share. What we want to do is be the plumbing layer behind that, where we can aggregate all of that inventory efficiently. And if you're an airline, we are the highest yielding, most efficient conversion channel in the world. I don't think that changes tomorrow. But if you're, one of the key questions will be with tech platforms or large e-commerce companies, let's say the large OTAs, will they be able to outcompete suppliers? Because AI is simply the ability to deploy capital more efficiently and to monetize eyeballs more efficiently. So I don't know that AI in and of itself will drive more supplier direct. I think the inverse may be true.
So you're not worried about a scenario where GDS is disintermediated, travel agents themselves are disintermediated, it's all direct?
No, I don't think so. And the reason for that is I have Nike sneakers. I'm not wearing them now, but I can buy Nike sneakers on Amazon. Nike's a pretty good brand. Why does Nike distribute through Amazon? Because some people choose Amazon as their channel. Mm-hmm. And I think consumers are going to still choose the channel in which they want to shop. And so, for example, if you want choice and transparency and you're on an individual supplier website, it's difficult to get at that. No different than that analogy. So I think the opportunity for intermediaries to still hold an important part in the ecosystem is not going to change.
Okay. Wanted to talk a little bit about Sabre Mosaic. That's your offer and order solution. What's your view on whether factors are now in place to do things differently, to handle things differently?
Yeah, so for those of you not familiar, Sabre Mosaic we released a few months ago. It is our new offer and order platform. If you listen to industry consultants out there like T2RL, we've gotten accolades for it being the best architected solution in the marketplace. We have more in production with the solution than anybody else that's introduced a similar platform. And over time, this will replace the traditional or legacy PSS platforms. What's unique about Sabre Mosaic, fully cloud native, it's open, modular, it is infused with generative AI, and it is agnostic to PSS, meaning it can sit on top of Sabre Sonic, on top of the Amadeus solutions, or on top of a homegrown or proprietary solution, and you can buy it en masse or you can buy it in components. So for the first time in a long time, Sabre is going to be able to play aggressive offense globally, and I'm really excited about that. Now, as you think about offer and order in the market, offer is beginning to get some traction. And think of offer as how do I better merchandise and retail my wares? Mm-hmm. And all airlines want to do that. And so we can put point solutions in that are fairly accretive and not disruptive. When you talk about order, if you're a large network carrier and you have a traditional PSS, you probably have somewhere between 300 to 900 apps or systems that hang off of that. So the change effort in order to change out your PSS for an order solution is monumental. It's probably a 4, 5, 6 year journey. And I think that's going to have a longer gestation period because of the pain of that process. I think, and IATA has talked about 2030 being the end date for when the market's there. I think on offer, there will have been massive progress. On order, it's going to be a much longer journey. But we're really excited about the prospect of what we're doing.
But isn't one of the issues the fact that many of the sort of secondary and tertiary airlines, and even right down to the agency community, are going to get left behind because they're not ready for NDC even? So,
well, think about, so offer and order are, that's simply how an airline ubiquitously chooses to distribute or merchandise across all channels. NDC is basically in the intermediary channel saying we're going to use this in place of an Edifact or legacy API. The good news is that we have, and probably one of our competitors have largely now solved NDC, where if you're a travel agent and you want to consume this at scale, whether it's in the OBT, your agent or counselor channel, whatever it may be, the functionality is now there that you can do that without it being severely disruptive to your operation. You have to now make downstream impacts to your own business. But I think that change has largely occurred. Okay. And I think you're going to see that, today, outside of OTAs, the adoption of NDC globally is only a couple of percent. We think that's going to grow exponentially. And in 12, 15 years, that will be the standard. But it's not going to happen in the next 1 or 2 years. It's going to grow, but from a relatively low base today.
Yeah. I wanted just to switch gear a little, talk about your earnings. You said already that Sabre is a different company now, and you did stress that during earnings. You also talked about Sabre's strength in corporate travel and how you kind of lean into that. And then kind of a few days before you announced the sale of Get there, is that not throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. And so we announced earnings, and Sabre's actually on a very good track. We will between 2023 and 2025. We're going to more than double our earnings. We're winning share at a pretty consistent pace. When you look at the corporate market specifically, and we are the largest GDS player in the corporate travel market, I think we offer a lot of value to both sides of that equation. As we look at our competitive posture, our multi-source content platform, what we're doing with hotel, and what we're doing with digital payments are three areas where we can really differentiate. As we looked at the Get There asset, and we looked at our strategy, we still liked it, but it wasn't core to strategically what we want to do or how we deliver value. We thought with the move to Circa, that would be better placed there. And we have a long-term partnership now with Circa that we think will be quite productive. So we feel like in terms of what we need to do to win in the marketplace, we've made the right steps.
Okay, is there a feeling at all that actually booking tools are going to change so dramatically in the next couple of years that maybe Get There isn't the best thing to be holding on to anymore?
Yeah, Get There is the second largest tool out there, I think, after Concur. I think there's a few phenomena that are happening with corporations. One is you've seen vertical integration with TMCs to try to control the customer journey.
Yep.
I can remember when I was a TMC guy some years ago, where if we didn't have control of the online booking interface with the customer, the user experience was typically lower than where we controlled that. Two is the ability for us to make money in our revenue model. We're dependent on controlling that interface. And so those are challenges that if you speak to large TMCs, they want to take on. The other thing is the best user experience doesn't always win. So sometimes, for example, the procurement is making the selection, and they'll look at it like ADP as a payment or as a platform to pay people. And so they'll say, well, expense management and booking, we're going to tie them together. We want the most utilitarian function. That doesn't always marry up with airlines and how they want to retail and merchandise. So right now there's a bit of a disequilibrium. The consumer doesn't love the user experience. Procurement is pretty happy. And then the airline or the hotelier are not happy with how that's marketed. And so I think over time, what's going to happen is you'll see a convergence and you'll see some winners there, but I don't know that individual point solutions are going to be what prevails in the long term. If you look at corporate travel, all TMCs are in a technology arms race, whether they realize that or not. And so there's going to be consolidation, whether that's winners and losers or whether that's through the market of consolidation. And when you look at that, basically, it's how do you amortize technology investment and become good at that? Because more and more, if you're a TMC and you have 70% online adoption, and yet you don't control the interface with the end user, that's a real challenge for you from a strategic standpoint. So I do think the corporate marketplace is going to evolve and change over time. And a TMC is going to look and feel more like an OTA, albeit with a lot more business logic embedded in how they do business.
So how then radically different would a booking tool be, in your view, with AI, everything that's coming at us?
So I think that the basic functions are the consumer wants choice, transparency, procurement wants lots of control and reporting and business logic there. That's all served up pretty well. The challenge is how do you marry that now with what an airline wants? With NDC, there's no individual standard. And so what you need are folks in the intermediary level, like Sabre, who are going to say, we'll satisfy what the airlines want to do. We'll drive high, basically very high yields with a very captive, very high value eyeball, but we'll do it in a way where we can normalize that content so that it's not confusing for the corporate traveler. Whereas if the corporate traveler has to go and they're taking a trip and they're spending 2 hours trying to beat the travel agent shopping, that's probably not what their CFO wants them to do. So the utility.
One sec. Because what about the consumer? Because we always talk about, you've talked about what the airline wants, the CFO wants, the procurement person wants, but maybe the consumer is going to be the one that.
The consumer being the corporate traveler.
Drive us.
Well, but here's the question. So if you work for a corporation and the corporation is paying you to do a job, let's say you're a software engineer and you have a trip and you're spending 2 hours planning your trip, is that what your company wants you to do? Or do they say, we have this efficient engine we want you to use. You don't get to choose your payroll application. You don't get to choose your invoice application. I don't think in managed travel that the traveler is going to have the ability to choose that. Now, the mandate for corporate travel is you have to bring a consumer-grade user experience with all the business logic.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're going to see the world go. The business logic is largely there. AI gives the opportunity to perhaps improve that user experience. But if the fulfillment is done in a very fragmented manner, and the servicing is challenging, which has been part of the issue with NDC, then you're going to have that traveler wasting time on those things. And I don't think that's the purpose of what you want that person doing.
So I know you won't address rumors about the hotel side of the business, but you have sold GetThere or in the process of selling GetThere. So do we then infer that this is about going back to your core? This is going back to distribution?
No. So distribution is about 70% of our revenue base today. It is the biggest piece of our business. We see material growth opportunities within distribution. When you look at our two IT businesses, in airline IT, with the launch of Sabre Mosaic, we think the long-term opportunity to really strengthen our position there is tremendous. And with Sabre Hospitality, our hotel IT business, that business is really on fire. We are the leading CRS player in the world. We have a very strong PMS offering. Our Synixis retailing offering is probably the best point-of-sale retailing solution in the market today, and that's growing exponentially from a relatively low base. That business next year, based on what we've talked about publicly, will be $100 million better than it was on an EBITDA basis than it was just in 2022. So over a 3-year period, a massive turnaround and transformation of that business. So no, that's only about 10% of the business today, but it's growing like a weed. Obviously, the valuation metrics, if you look at, let's say, comparables like Agilysys, which is a $3 billion market cap company, you'd say, wow, that's not fairly valued in Sabre. What we want to do is just perform and make sure over time that our investors and shareholders, they understand the value of what we're doing.
Does it worry you at all that perhaps one of your competitors is seeming to win a lot of the big accounts? Because you got Hyatt, great, but and they got some, on the PMS side. Obviously.
That's a great question. So if you look at Sabre Hospitality, again, we won Hyatt. We won that last year. We'll be fully implemented with Hyatt within 2 years of signing that contract. The experience that our competitors having in what they have won are 4 or 5 year implementation cycles. We're basically, why is that? We're putting them on the Synixis platform while we're doing configuration work and we're building out some specific functionality that will all go to the benefit of the community. So what's very interesting is in the airline IT space, Amadeus has a real platform-oriented approach toward their business. Our understanding of what they've done in hospitality is it's more bespoke, trying to replace Marcia for Marriott, et cetera. What we have done in our hospitality business is very akin to what they have done in air, which is we're taking a platform approach. We're not doing customization. We're choosing the right customers for our platform. But when you look at a business that's growing, very significant top line, went from negative 30 million in 22 to positive 70 million next year, I think you could say we're doing the right things. And this is probably the envy of the industry in terms of hotel tech.
Okay, we've got a minute. So one sentence on the following. What one thing would you change about the business right now if you could?
I don't love our balance sheet.
Fair.
I've been CEO for about 18 months. We probably had more debt coming into COVID than we'd like. We burned through a lot of cash, partly for our technology transformation. And we have a plan to delever materially over time. But I'd love not to have that much debt.
Fair enough. What would you wish that would be easier right now?
What would be easier? I think we've done a good job really improving the pace of innovation and the pace of change. As a B2B or intermediary player, we're reliant upon all of our partners and customers. Those are airlines, hoteliers, travel agencies, corporations, to basically adopt the changes that we're doing. So we, for example, could have a new platform that's better, but it requires work by the customer to integrate on their side. And so that's always a challenge with B2B, is your pace of innovation is somewhat subject to your partner's ability to eat that.
What's the one piece of advice that you were given, throughout your career that you have kind of lived by?
Best advice was probably from my father, which is surround yourself with the best, the smartest, the most apolitical people that you can. When I look at the team that we have at Sabre, for example, there's not a person at the executive table who was sitting there before COVID. And it is really like the Knights of the Round Table, very egalitarian, but really focused on an obsession around the customer and an obsession around executing through our employees. And so I think that's the best counsel is, at my age, I do this by choice, and I'm very fortunate, but work with people you deeply trust and respect. It makes work a lot more fun.
Sounds like good advice. Kurt Ekert, CEO, President Sabre, thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.